All right, go ahead and get started because it is 4 o'clock. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on long-term biological monitoring. Long-term monitoring is one of the most powerful tools that we have for understanding how ecosystems, species populations, and environmental conditions change over time. By maintaining consistent data collection, we can uncover patterns and trends that inform scientific discovery, guide conservation, and support better resource management. These data sets are essential for evaluating the impacts of climate change, tracking biodiversity loss, informing habitat restoration, and improving ecological forecasting. In this session, we'll hear from a few researchers and practitioners who are working at the forefront of long-term monitoring efforts. They'll share successes, challenges, and innovations in sustaining these programs, from adapting new tools and analytical approaches to ensuring data continuity and accessibility across decades. We'll also explore key scientific findings that have emerged from those long-term data sets and how they're being applied to real-world conservation and management. So our first talk today is going to be a recorded talk. It is in Spanish, so if you need to click that QR code, go ahead and do it now to get the translation services. And with that, our first talk is going to be by Andrea Ros Candiera, and she'll be talking about the Observatorio del Cambio Global de Sierra Nevada.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Andrea Ros y trabajo en la Universidad de Granada, en España. Formo parte del equipo de gestión de datos del Observatorio del Cambio Global de Sierra Nevada, que es un proyecto colaborativo entre dos instituciones. Por un lado, la Universidad de Granada y por otro, el Gobierno regional, que es la Junta de Andalucía. Bueno, estas dos instituciones que colaboran tienen diferentes roles, siendo la Universidad de Granada la que ejerce la coordinación científica de la mano del profesor Regino Zamora. En el año 2008, el observatorio se consolidó con dos objetivos claros. Por un lado, hacer un seguimiento a largo plazo de los ecosistemas de montaña de Sierra Nevada para evaluar los efectos del cambio global y, por otro, gestionar los datos que se generasen en esos monitoreos. Además, por supuesto, de recopilar toda la información útil sobre Sierra Nevada. Es decir, no limitarnos solo a los datos de los seguimientos, sino que recopilar también, por ejemplo, pues datos históricos, datos tomados por otras instituciones científicas, datos procedentes de proyectos de ciencia ciudadana, etc., ¿no? Pero ¿por qué Sierra Nevada? ¿Dónde se encuentra y por qué es tan importante? Bueno, la región montañosa de Sierra Nevada se ubica en el sureste de la península ibérica y está considerada como uno de los puntos calientes de biodiversidad más importantes de la cuenca mediterránea. En ella se encuentra el área protegida Espacio Natural de Sierra Nevada, que fue considerada Reserva de la Biosfera en el año 1986, posteriormente en el 89 Parque Natural y finalmente con la declaración de Parque Nacional en el 99. Bueno, la comunidad científica internacional considera que tanto la región mediterránea como las áreas de montaña se encuentran entre las zonas más amenazadas por el cambio climático. En este sentido, Sierra Nevada constituye un laboratorio natural único para estudiar precisamente estos procesos globales, donde las señales del cambio global pues ya se ponen de manifiesto, como puede ser, por ejemplo, la disminución de la capa de nieve en los últimos 40 años. Para generar conocimiento científico sobre estos impactos y posteriormente poder transferirlo a la gestión y a la sociedad, es necesario hacer un seguimiento a largo plazo de los ecosistemas. El programa de seguimiento del observatorio se inspiró en un inicio en las áreas temáticas propuestas por la iniciativa europea Glochamore y actualmente el observatorio mantiene activos un amplio abanico de protocolos de seguimiento que abarcan desde los ecosistemas forestales, ecosistemas acuáticos como las lagunas de alta montaña, especies endémicas de flora y fauna, seguimiento de nieve, etc. En la imagen pueden ver, por ejemplo, la ficha de seguimiento de mariposas diurnas y, bueno, en nuestra página web pues, pueden encontrar los manuales de otros seguimientos. Bueno, como resultado de todos estos monitoreos, el observatorio ha generado largas series temporales de datos de gran interés. Sin embargo, hay que tener en cuenta que la toma de datos es solo el inicio de un proceso a lo largo del cual es importante aplicar buenas prácticas de gestión de datos. En nuestro caso, seguimos los principios FAIR como metodología de trabajo, tanto con los datos como con los metadatos, para poder asegurar cuestiones como su preservación a largo plazo, su accesibilidad, su interoperabilidad para el intercambio de información y su reutilización para otros potenciales usuarios. Por esta razón, nuestro equipo desarrolla también servicios de datos propios destinados a mejorar la gestión de los datos. Un ejemplo de ello es nuestro sistema de información linaria, donde se almacenan los datos ecológicos y de biodiversidad tomados en los seguimientos del observatorio que mencionaba anteriormente, además de otros datos tomados por investigadores. Linaria consiste en un sistema de gestión de bases de datos relacionales de tipo PostgreSQL, PostGIS. La parte del front-end, como los formularios web de entrada de datos, como pueden ver en la imagen, ese ejemplo, se diseñan con Django y Java. Pero bueno, ¿cuáles son las funcionalidades de Linaria como sistema de información? Por supuesto, la primera función es digitalizar y almacenar datos. Pero esto conlleva también otra serie de funcionalidades, como puede ser preservar la información a largo plazo, gestionar los usuarios y permisos, gestionar información taxonómica, muy importante, visualizar la información espacial de los puntos, transectos o parcelas de muestreo, realizar descargas personalizadas de los datos y, bueno, en definitiva, pues hacer accesible la información a los usuarios. Bueno, para que se haga una idea de la cantidad de información que aloja Linaria, a día de hoy en la base de datos acumula ya más de 750.000 registros procedentes de más de 31.000 muestreos de campo. Otro ejemplo es el portal de datos Clima Nevada, que integra más de 200 millones de datos climáticos de Sierra Nevada y sus alrededores, procedentes de más de 20 proveedores de datos distintos, que pueden ser pues, instituciones públicas, empresas privadas, proyectos de investigación concretos, etc. Bueno, como parte de nuestra estrategia de gestión de datos, el observatorio dedica esfuerzos a estar presente y compartir datos y metadatos en infraestructuras y redes internacionales de seguimiento ecológico y de la biodiversidad, como pueden ser GBIF y el ETER, entre otras. Al final, pues tanto estas conexiones como los servicios de datos que mencioné anteriormente son, digamos, la herramienta base para poder sostener y generar ese conocimiento científico sobre los ecosistemas de montaña. En el caso de GBIF, llevamos más de 12 años publicando conjuntos de datos. Como pueden ver en la diapositiva, hemos publicado más de 211.000 registros de especies y más de 600 trabajos científicos han incluido en sus descargas registros de nuestra institución. En la gráfica de la izquierda pueden ver, por ejemplo, el número de descargas acumuladas de cada uno de los conjuntos de datos que hemos publicado, acumulando el más antiguo más de 33.000 descargas. Entonces, para nosotros como proveedores de datos, pues la publicación de datos en GBIF conlleva evidentemente múltiples beneficios en relación a los principios FAIR que les mencionaba anteriormente, ¿no? Al final, pues al publicar datos y metadatos en GBIF conseguimos que nuestros datasets sean pues un recurso citable, ¿no? Al asignarle un DOI, un identificador único global. Esto hace que los datos, evidentemente, pues sean localizables. Al integrarlos en abierto en un repositorio público internacional como GBIF, pues se vuelven accesibles, más incluso que publicándolos en un repositorio institucional local como puede ser Linaria, en el sentido de que tienen pues, menos visibilidad internacional en ese caso, ¿no? También se asegura su preservación a largo plazo al estar alojados en infraestructuras pues, más estables, que cuentan con el apoyo de los gobiernos, y también mejoran su interoperabilidad al estandarizar los datos a Darwin Core y los datos al estándar EML. También mejoran su calidad al pasar por varios procesos de validación previos a la publicación de los datos, y todo ello pues, hace posible que los datos puedan ser reutilizados por otros usuarios, ¿no? Porque además están pues, bien documentados de manera completa y hay una trazabilidad. Pero bueno, todo esto queríamos mencionar que también supone un impacto positivo para GeoBIF, pues al final pues, creemos que es necesario complementar estas grandes infraestructuras de datos con datos provenientes de estudios ecológicos a largo plazo, es decir, estos que llevan a cabo monitoreos consistentes en cuanto a metodología y en cuanto a que se mantienen en el tiempo, ¿no? Y que al final son los que aportan información muy valiosa desde el punto de vista científico y ecológico. Bueno, en el caso de Letter, llevamos años también publicando metadatos a través de DAMES, que es su catálogo de metadatos, y recientemente hemos comenzado la publicación de datos en DAR, que es el nuevo portal de datos de Letter enfocado a las observaciones estándar o Standard Observations en inglés, ¿no? Estas variables son una nueva propuesta de la comunidad científica de Letter que busca armonizar los sistemas de monitoreo definiendo, bueno, en este caso a nivel europeo, qué medimos y cómo lo medimos, ¿no? Bueno, por último, me gustaría resaltar otra de las tareas que realizamos en este proceso de gestión de datos y que está destinada a poner en valor esos datos, ¿no? Es como un plus más, que es la publicación de artículos de datos o data papers, que describen en profundidad uno o más conjuntos de datos que ya estén publicados en abierto. Entonces, esto es como ya la fase final, ¿no? Esto supone un sello más de calidad científica, una mayor visibilidad internacional y, por supuesto, reconocimiento académico a los proveedores de datos. Bueno, en esta diapositiva pueden ver algunos de los ejemplos de data papers que hemos ido publicando en los últimos años. Bueno, muchas gracias por su atención. Les dejo los datos de contacto por si les surge cualquier pregunta. Estaremos encantados de contestarles. Gracias.
Great. So in my rush to start on time, I completely forgot to introduce myself and my co-moderator over here. So my name is Chandra Earl. I work at the Neon Ecological Observatory Network, which is a long-term ecological monitoring project located in the United States. And over here, I have my co-moderator, Ed Gilbert, who works at the Neon Biorepository with me. And then online, we have Kelsey Ewell, who is also there as well. Our next talk is going to be by Eric Sokol, who is also from Neon, and he'll be talking about the EcoCom DP app, lessons learned from a convergence effort to develop tools for cross-network biodiversity synthesis.
All right, thanks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. As Chandra said, my name is Eric Sokol. I'm a staff scientist with the National Ecological Observatory Network. And today I'm going to be talking about the EcoCom DP app, which was a project by some undergraduate interns. And I think there are some really interesting lessons that we learned going through the process of building this application. And the collaborations I'm going to be talking about today are larger than that, though. They include collaborations with the U.S. Long-Term Ecological Research Network, folks from the Environmental Data Initiative who run the data repository for the U.S. LTER, and then also folks from this working group that we're starting to spin up, focusing on infrastructure for AI for biodiversity. And the process that we went through for building this app provided some lessons kind of thinking about new technologies, and I'll get into that at the end. Okay, so first we'll start off with what is EcoCom DP. And so it's a data model that we've implemented at Neon and at the LTER, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but the motivation is to have a data model for analysis-ready data specifically for community ecology. And it's a data catalog that includes data from Neon, from the LTER, but also different projects funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation, so like macrosystems projects, long-term or LTREB projects, and other projects funded through the national funding program. And then I think there are also some non-NSF data sets in there. And then we also have an R package, which provides tools to provide data sets in this format to deposit in the Environmental Data Initiative's repository, but then also to search, view, and download and explore data. And then lastly, we have the app that, again, as I mentioned, was a project from some interns that provide essentially a GUI to work with the search function in the library of functions that we have. Okay, so this project is, as I mentioned, a collaboration between us and the LTER and EDI. And really it fits well within the mission of NEON to support synthesis and open science. And then also some priorities that the US LTER identified in a recent decadal review. So they came away with something like 7 or 10 priorities that they wanted to address moving forward. And numbers 1 and 2 were centered around ecological synthesis. And number 6 was specifically to prioritize fair data. So interoperability, fair data, open science are all very much goals of NEON and the LTER. So this effort has also been a long-term effort thinking about the best ways to synthesize or to harmonize data amongst our networks. And so the beginning of this partnership between NEON and LTER stemmed from synthesis groups funded by the Long-Term Ecological Research Network. And in their first iteration of synthesis projects supported by the current iteration of the network, they had something like 4 or 5 groups doing community ecology, and they kept doing this process you have in synthesis where you have all your different raw data sets, you create your analysis ready data set where things are are interoperable and you can compare them, and then you create your drive data sets. And they found that the different working groups kept doing the same process over and over again, creating the same analysis-ready data sets. And so this is where we decided we need to kind of wrangle these efforts across these working groups that keep doing the same thing. And so that's where the EcoCom DP data model comes in. And so basically the schematic shows kind of roughly, we have the original data sets in EDI's repository. They maintain the data provenance. And then we have the analysis ready data set, and then folks go off and in an ideal world create their drive data sets that they also deposit in EDI. And then at NEON, we've coordinated with EDI where we have our data sets mapped to the data model, and so we want everything to be interoperable. So I'm not going to go into the details in the data model. It's very similar to the STAR schema in a Darwin Core archive, and we've mapped it to the Darwin Core archive, so it provides an opportunity to increase interoperability there. And kind of to illustrate how it's facilitating collaboration between the two networks, the data sets that we have in this data pattern, if you go and search EDI's data portal, you use the keyword EcoCom DP and you find the data sets that are formatted in this data pattern. There's something like, I think 80 or 90 data sets that they have in this format, and then NEON has complementary data sets that aren't currently stashed in the repository, but they're available through our API. And to give a little context, so the LTER, here are their sites on the map, and their data sets span long time ranges. So some of the LTER is up to 40 years old. Some of the data sets are approaching or older than 100 years old and predate the LTER, but they're all site specific. And then NEON, the National Ecological Observatory, we've been in full operation since 2019, so we only have 6 years of full data, but we're meant to go 30 years. Some of our data go back to 2012, and the complementary part is that we have more spatial coverage. So we have 80 plus sites spread across the continental US, Puerto Rico, Alaska, and Hawaii. And beyond biodiversity data, we collect lots of different types of environmental data. So I won't get into the details on that, but just want to point out that there's lots of complementary data. What's available in EcoCom DP is these specific data products for these specific taxonomic groups. And so we have our package on CRAN that you can use to search the data, and download the data, and also there are tools in there if you want to create data sets in the same data pattern. And so real quick, the R package functionality for folks who are conducting ecological synthesis is pretty simple. We have a regular expression text search that searches abstracts and titles. And then if you find your data set, you can read it into your R environment. And then we have a series of simple plotting functions to explore data with the plot underscore prefix. And so this was a nice foundation for some undergrad researchers in partnership with the NSF-funded I-4 internship program at St. Edward's University to bring computer scientists into the fold. And so these are computer scientist students working with ecologists, data managers at EDI. We brought in, I think, some folks from the biorepository also met with us a few times. And we also partnered with a synthesis center that's at the University of Colorado Boulder across the street from the NEON headquarters. We brought in some domain experts from the Biological Resilience Working Group from a 2024 Innovation Summit that they held. So we had an expert user group. And so the process we have here, this is where the convergence approach comes in. So we have data providers, so NEON, LTER, EDI. We have domain knowledge experts, including some folks from the LTER, computer science students, and then we have the user group, which is a whole mix of folks from the synthesis workshop that we brought in as an expert user group. And so we had this iterative process going back and forth about what are the sorts of questions and queries that the science group, the user group wants to make, what's possible given the infrastructure that we have in the different repositories, and then what's practical for an intern to work on over the summer. And so the app that they came up with is the Shiny app here that basically gives you a user interface to work with those functions that I showed you guys earlier. Okay, so the lessons learned, this was the interesting part to me. So, we have the CS students learned how to work with user groups, and the ecologists learned that all their wishes usually aren't practical for intern developers. But for us as data providers, this was a really valuable exercise. So it really gave us an understanding of what the data user needs are, what's possible given our current data infrastructure, and some ideas of where we need to go. So the next steps, we've been converting the way we store and deliver data to a more cloud-native approach. And so the needs that the user group had were really amenable to some of these cloud-based solutions. So for example, we're working on converting the way we serve up data to cloud-native formats like Parquet, using tools like Apache Arrow or DuckDB to access those data sets. So this isn't in production yet, but it's something that's under development. And it has two benefits. One is that we can better leverage the metadata for more efficient data exploration. And also we can more efficiently work with large data sets. I'm happy to talk more about kind of some of the nuts and bolts of that later, but we don't have time right now. And then also a lot of the things that the user group wanted to do were things that folks are developing with AI-based tools. So we get inquiries like every week or two about someone building a new chatbot or LLM tool that they want to hook up to NEON. And so we need to start to think about how can we implement the knowledge from these two networks to start to do things like determine what are the guardrails we need when people are doing this stuff. How do we validate these models that people are making to make sure that queries return the correct things, they're not hallucinating, stuff like that. So we want to leverage these criteria for analysis ready data to start benchmarking AI tools. And so to that end, we're standing up a working group where we're trying to understand the requirements for AI-ready biodiversity data infrastructure for open science. And so we had our first workshop this summer, and we're going to have a series of workshops coming up. The next one will be in January. So if you're interested, come and let me know. We're including data providers, data users, cyber infrastructure providers, folks who are developers for ML and AI tools, and then also liaisons to the user community. And so the vision is something like this, where we have all these different groups that provide data. They have their different APIs, their different data models. And we don't want to prescribe how people should build their infrastructure, but we want to understand what it takes to understand the different infrastructures, the different APIs and data models. And so that's what this series of workshops is meant to be, is to get folks together who are working in this space so that we can kind of figure out, what do the data providers need to know to make their data available and ready for folks, and kind of thinking about the other end, the user end too. And one of the interesting things that came away from these workshops was thinking about the continuum of data readiness for AI applications. So, at NEON, we publish fair data, and we put a lot of work into making data fair. But then that doesn't necessarily mean it's AI ready. So AI ready, means your data are heavily curated for a specific application often. Not always, but often that's the case. And with NEON, we don't know what the different applications are that folks are going to be building to interface with our data. But we want to make our data fair for AI. So fair enough that you can automate the process for taking our data and moving it on to these other applications. And so that continuum of AI readiness looks a lot like this workflow in synthesis. And so I think a place for the discussion to go is to think about the traditional, ecological synthesis open science framework where we have our L0, L1, derived data products, and how that maps onto the efforts that we might be putting into building AI tools, having data that we want to make fair for AI, where do the responsibilities lie, and then also thinking about where can we leverage our knowledge to start to design, what are some benchmark data sets we can make, where in this workflow would we implement them, where do we want to have our checks, things like that. I don't have any answers yet, but it's just kind of where the discussion is going. So again, if you're interested in talking more about this, feel free to email me, and I'll take any questions if I have time. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Our next speaker is going to be Rodrigo Jorge, who is going to talk to us about the biodiversity monitoring in protected areas in Brazil, building a path to turn data into evidence-based environmental management decisions.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, I'm presenting here the biodiversity monitoring program from Brazil in protected areas, and our goal to build a path to turn data into evidence-based environmental management decisions. I'm Rodrigo. I'm currently the coordinator of the Monitora program. And yeah, so let's go on. Well, the Monitora program is managed by the Instituto Chico Mendes de Conservação da Biodiversidade, which is the institution that manages the federal protected areas in Brazil. We have nowadays 344 protected areas in Brazil. We also have 14 research centers at ICMBio that are all working together on implementing the Monitora program. And our mission is to take care of nature with people. Well, now I'll explain a little bit our structure and principles at the Monitora program. So, as you can see here, the Monitora program is divided in 3 sub-programs, which are terrestrial, freshwater, and marine. And each sub-program is divided in components, and the components are divided in targets. So we have here, for instance, for the terrestrial sub-program, we have the forest component and the savanna and grassland component. And for example, in the forest component, we have as targets mammals, birds, trees, and frugivorous butterflies, fruit-feeding butterflies. So, and our principles, now still about the targets, we have global targets that are aimed to answer the question if the system of protected areas is conserving biodiversity. And we also have complementary targets which tend to answer more local or regional questions about how do we subsidize the management of a protected area, a specific or a group of protected areas. So, for example, we have the Amazonian nut target that is monitored in some protected areas where the traditional people that live there use the Brazilian nut. About the principles, the Monitora program was developed to be simple and fast, standardized and cheap, modular. So with the targets, we have basic protocols and advanced protocols for those protected areas that can implement more complex methodology. Inclusive and effective for management. And inclusive means that we have in our core of the program the social participation. So that means to this next slide, where I can talk a little bit about how do we plan the participation of the traditional people in the Monitora program. So the idea is that they participate in each step of the monitoring. So we have the planning step, the training step, the data collection, and the results discussion. And probably that part of the results discussion is the more innovative of the Monitora program, because we organize workshops where we take the results and the experts present the results to the traditional people, and traditional people discuss those results and they interpret the results, and in several occasions they are the ones that can raise the hypothesis with the local information they have. Our status, our current status. We have today 129 protected areas that implement the Monitora program, that are mainly in all of Brazil, in all the territory, but we have a bit of a concentration in the Amazon, and we have 82 protected areas that are in the terrestrial sub-program, 31 in the freshwater one, and 37 in the marine. Well, just to clarify a little bit about data collection and management, we have a system that was developed for managing the data, and which is called SysMonitora, and I'd like to emphasize that we have on that system, it is integrated with some tools. For instance, the Open Data Kit tool, which it's an open tool that we can customize our digital forms for using in cell phones. So the monitors go to the field and collect the data directly on their cell phones. Well, about the potential application of the results for public policies and conservation strategies, we have it in different scales. I'm sorry, it is in Portuguese, but I'll explain it to you. So, but basically, we have the international, national and regional scale, and local scale. And for the international scale, we have the application for agreements or conventions. In the national scale, we have the use of the data for assessing the risk of extinction of species. And for the regional and local, we have the use of data for planning the management of the protected areas and for instance, planning the use of fisheries, for example. One example of the use of the Monitora data for protected area management is from the Lagoa do Peixe National Park, where we have the fishery target implemented, and there is an agreement. It's a kind of protected area that is a restrictive one, but there is a traditional community, so there is an agreement for allowing native shrimp fishing. So there is the monitoring of fishery, of the fishing of shrimp is participative, and the fishermen, they measure the length of the shrimp. And with that data, and we analyze it, and then they can see if the shrimp that is being caught is larger or smaller. And with that data, they decide if they can do the fisheries, or in some times where the shrimp are smaller, they suspend for a while the fisheries for the population to be able to recuperate. Another example is for the forest component. We sent a report, we launched a report last year that brought data from 2014 to 2022. I have some copies in English of the executive summary here. And just to give an example, for the mammals and terrestrial birds, we had 25,000 kilometers of transects in 53 protected areas, and 160 species were registered, among them 35 threatened ones. And we had stability considering all protected areas. So we can see here the graph of the geometric means of abundance, and it's stable for all the protected areas. And we had 161 populations of 49 species sampled, analyzed, and 148 were stable. 2 had an increasing trend, and 11 had a declining trend. So with that, we also, with the report and with the analysis, we developed dashboards, and we have that data for all protected areas together, or for every and each protected area. So this is an example for one protected area, and we try to define some simplified indicators so that it's depending on the threshold. If you have a stable or increasing population, the indicator is green. If the population is declining until a determined threshold, it's yellow, and if it's declining beyond that threshold, it's red. So this is for plants. In that case, they're all stable. Plants, butterflies, mammals, and birds. And we have for each one of the targets here, the graphs, and a table here with with all the targets for all protected areas with the simplified indicator. So to finish, our idea is in the future to have a faster availability of the data and analysis. We intend to develop a tool to suggest causes of possible changes and management measures, and also to develop dashboards and that same tool for the other subprograms and components. So thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry, if you want to see the QR code there with our material, it's all available. And well, we thank our supporters and also our partners. Thank you very much.
Okay, and last, do we have Marta here? Yes. Hi, so our last speaker is going to be Marta Paula Baraja Barbosa, and she will be talking to us about integrating global and regional information on direct and indirect drivers of neotropical biodiversity.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paola Barajas. I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia, but I'm a scientist working in Germany, in Leipzig. So, yeah, today I want to share some of very raw ideas that I've been developing in the last year about biodiversity change and its drivers, particularly in the neotropics, where is the region that I originally come from. To give you a little bit of to start with some context, so humans, we have been modifying the abiotic and biotic components of the environment for millennia. So here in this graph, in this anthrop map, sorry, I need to see this. So here I'm showing you the anthrop map, where you can see through along the line as we approach the present. So humans had been inserting new land types into the environment, replacing and creating more heterogeneity. So, and so these massive changes that humans are making into the environment also create an impact in biodiversity. And so here, I like this image, this figure very much, because depending on the extent of human actions, we can have different scenarios in which, for instance, in gray, biodiversity is not doing so well, but in green, depending on what we continue doing in the future, the status of biodiversity maybe won't be so bad. And so, as a response of these transformations of the biotic and abiotic components of the environment, there have been large-scale data compilations as a response to understand these changes. And here I brought you some of the big examples of such data, like the predicts. It's not time series data per se, it's data that is used as a space for time, but also, for instance, biotime data, or more regional data, like the North American Bird Breeding Survey, also known as the BBS, but also global data tracking forest cover change, or land use land cover maps. This is more regional data called Map Biomas. This is a very big project led by Brazil and covering most of the neotropical countries. So using these huge data mobilized compilations of data, this is great because this had also moved forward the research of biodiversity change and the effect of the drivers. So here I'm showing you an example of a study of Newbold using predicts data, where one of their key findings was that here you can see that what they found is the tropical biomes are having the large biodiversity reductions in terms of only species richness, and this is happening also in areas where the land use changes are the ones that are more used by humans. And here I also brought you an example of my own research that we're preparing, where we use the BBS data, this North American bird information, coupled with land use, land cover data for the United States. And where we are finding, using this time series data, is that, because we did an analysis of beta diversity, is that the turnover of bird communities in the United States is coupled also with an increase of environmental heterogeneity. And in this case, environmental heterogeneity, we're measuring as different land use types in the country. And this is great, but as we know, for several decades, biodiversity data and also the information related to its drivers is geographically biased, in particular in the studies that we used to call global. There was always a bias due to different factors that I'm naming here. But then, of course, as a result, the knowledge and the picture of global changes is biased because particularly the mega-diverse regions, the data has not been always integrated. So based on this state of art and my research based on using data, very, very beautiful data, as we will call it, I got the idea, well, why don't we do something similar for the neotropics? It's a mega diverse region, it's great, why not? So my idea was to understand how drivers of biodiversity change, in particularly the ones related to human activities, such as change of cover in forest and land use, are affecting, for instance, communities in the neotropics. And because I am a crocologist, I decided to go rather big at the continental scale. But then I faced the first challenge that even going, this is only from the perspective of using these large-scale compilations of data, time series, is that, of course, there is huge limitations for the region. And my initial idea, I'm showing you here, is started in a region that is called the Orinoquia between Colombia and Venezuela. And as you can see here in the maps, this region has very almost nothing coverage. Is this one? And so I decided, okay, this requires a different effort than just sitting behind my computer and trying to mobilize data via internet. But then I thought, okay, this might need other type of effort, but let's continue with the drivers. And of course, with the drivers, the picture is a bit different because thanks to remote sensing data, at least we can do analysis like the one I'm presenting today. So right now, to cope with or to try to tackle my research question and my idea, I'm using map biomas. That is a really big project, I already mentioned it, and also recently published data on tree cover change. And so, because I want regional, I decided not to do at the biome scale, but at the ecoregion scale. Those are regions that relate, that are more ecologically sound, or are ecologically sound. They relate to also processes at the ecosystem level, but also relate to plant communities. And so the analysis I'm showing you in a second is at the ecoregion level. And I'm using the data, this fractional tree cover data set, and map biomas. And so I limited my study area to 88 ecoregions that are the ones that belong to the neotropics, but only in South America. And so what we did, we first calculated yearly mean values of tree cover at the ecoregion level. Then, because this is very recent, I'm only using simple linear models to extract the trends. And then I extracted the slopes that I'm going to show you. And also I used the map biomas because I consider these information more locally informed information to compare also my results. And this is the part that requires perhaps more integration if we want to continue using different products. So here I'm showing you the first results. This is a really long plot. But on one hand, what we see here, just looking really quickly, is that the results are very heterogeneous. So tree cover change is, for some ecoregions, is increasing, for many doesn't, it's 0, and for some of them is decreasing. So here in the 0 line, everything on the right side of the 0 line is increasing, and on the left side is decreasing. So I wanted to focus also in certain ecoregions that draw our attention, like the Ecuadorian dry forest, the Patia Valley dry forest, located in Ecuador and Colombia. They are increasing. And some ecoregions that are also well known for being quite destroyed in the forest, like the Brazilian Atlantic forest and the Cinto Tocantins Araguaia moist forest in Brazil. So I kind of zoom in into these different ecoregions, and I wanted to see not only the trends, because what I just showed you are the slopes, which tells you the magnitude and direction of change, but I wanted to zoom in before and see what is going on and how the trends look for these particular ecoregions. So we see that for the Ecuadorian dry forest and the Patia Valley forest, the tree cover is increasing, and here in the orange ones are the ones that are decreasing. One thing that we need to consider when doing time series analysis, of course, is the length of the time series. Here we are doing an analysis in the past 2 decades, and this definitely modifies the results. And this I realized when I compared these results to the information coming from map biomas that I'm showing you here. So there are discrepancies, especially for the Ecuadorian dry forest and the Patia Valley forest. Here, according to map biomas, those are ecoregions where forest is decreasing. There are consistencies for the Brazilian and the Cinto Tocantins moist forest. And one of the things that I realized, of course, these discrepancies relate to the different characteristics of the data, on the length of the time series, but also on the characteristics of the remote sensing data. Because I'm also interested, and I talked a lot about land use change, I'm also interested in seeing how the agricultural frontier is modifying this. So I also use map biomas to check how the agricultural is changing, and potentially this doesn't mean any correlation. There is nothing that I'm doing an analysis yet about correlation, but potentially here, this increases in these 2 ecoregions, might be coupled with the decrease of forest. What I found interesting is that in the previous slide, I show you the Brazilian Atlantic forest is decreasing, but this type of agriculture is also decreasing. So, of course, I'm working with map biomas. It's data that is a categorical data, has different classes, so potentially not this class that I'm analyzing here is the one that is causing the decrease, if there is a coupling change. So with this, I wanted to conclude, well, several things. On one hand, that of course biodiversity drivers change in complex ways, and of course our results will change dramatically depending on the length of the time series. The shorter the time series is, the more uncertainties we will have about the change, but also the products that I am using in this case. And the integration of this global information and the regional one, especially the regional one that contains local information, like map biomas, is very important when we do this kind of analysis. And of course, because I'm a person that has done global analysis, I also come now to realize that it's also important to go regional, especially in, let's say, in the neotropicals or Latin America, where the socio-economical contexts that also affect the environment are very different from what we have in the global north, for instance. And with this, one of the ideas is to continue inserting or including other drivers that can signal this effect of how development and socio-economy change the neotropical environment. And thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to receive questions.
Great, thank you guys so much. Okay, we have to be out of here at 5 on the dot, so I think maybe we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, if anybody has any for our 3 speakers, or our 4 speakers actually. Do we have nothing online? Okay, but in case we don't have that time, Eric is there, Paula is there, Rodrigo is there, so you can find them after. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and where you're from before you talk, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'm Andy Bruder from Switzerland. I coordinate a freshwater biodiversity monitoring program in the national park there, and your talk was a good inspiration for my work. My question, based on your presentation, was in the Amazonas, where you have a lot of these areas, protected areas. I wonder, there it's very difficult, in my opinion, to clearly separate between terrestrial and stream-focused protected areas, which seemed to be your categorization. So how do you account for these very tight connections between terrestrial and aquatic biodiversity, or changes in biodiversity, or also the stressors that often work across these connections? And then also the management implications that should respect those interactions, I think.
Thank you for your question. We actually, when one protected area informs us of its interest to implement Monitora program, we do an analysis of vocation, we call it. We see if it's the forest is the dominant environment in the protected area. But for the Amazon, all of them pretty much have mostly forest, but they have a lot of streams and rivers. So we also have a questionnaire for the management needs for every protected area. So if they have management needs that are more of related to hunting, logging, it's gonna go through the vocation of forest. If it's fisheries and activities related to rivers or streams, it will go more for the freshwater sub-program. But actually, if you see detailed the map, you have some protected areas that do both. And if they have the capacity and the need, the management need for that.
Okay, great. It is 5 o'clock, and we do have to get out of this room because they have to prepare it for the cocktail hour. So if you wouldn't mind going out there and looking at the posters, the cocktail hour will be at 6:30 in here. So return. And if you wouldn't mind real quick giving a round of applause for our speakers and, of course, our wonderful IT, that would be great.